but he's a presidential historian and a great mind on politics. How about it for the great John Rothmann, everybody? Look at you, you sexy beast.
Happy to be with you. Happy to be with you, 100%.
I am, look at this, Noe Marie. Yay, Mark Thompson show on a Wednesday. Exactly, right on. Thank you, Noe. Say hi to John Rothmann, Noe.
I know.
So, John, let's talk about what we were just speaking of quickly. I just want to check off on it. And then I want to get into some of these political attack ads that have to do with the trans community, et cetera. But when it comes to disaster relief, I think historically, there really hasn't been red-blue type distinctions that have been drawn. Am I wrong about that? Or hasn't disaster relief been handed out in a pretty egalitarian way?
It has, but remember, there's been controversy. Remember George W. Bush, great job, Brownie. You remember that?
Sure.
These sorts of things happen. But I have to tell you, I agree with you 100%. What Donald Trump has done to politicize the disaster that is taking place is horrific. And I do want to remind people that Donald Trump has been a consistent denier of climate change. And I say this respectfully because it should all catch up to him. But it's very clear, and I'm watching now what happens in Florida, in Georgia, and in North Carolina, because those three states are critical to Donald Trump in the election. And if, in fact, this storm is so disruptive, will he then claim fraud? And let me just also tell you, and it's very interesting, already there are Republicans who are saying that the climate crisis that we are going through at this moment, these hurricanes, was engineered by the government. I mean, it's mind-boggling, it's inconceivable, but it's true.
Well, I mean, and there's, just because I know you're sensitive to this, and we should all be sensitive to it, there's an anti-Semitism underpinning, I should say, underlying some of those comments from Marjorie Taylor Greene. Isn't that right?
Absolutely. Remember her space lasers? The Jews were responsible for the forest fires. I mean, all I can tell you is it is, to me, profoundly disturbing. And what is more disturbing when I see the polls is how half of America, almost half of America, can accept this kind of nonsense and brush it off as if it doesn't matter. It does matter.
I want to ask you about the state of the campaigns as we get to the finish line. Albert, can you play, what do we have up, Albert? What do you have ready to go? I'll go in any direction you are ready to rock. Here we go. Thank you. This is exactly what I wanted. They are going real hard on trans rights and actions on the part of Kamala Harris to support the trans community. This is a wedge issue culturally, and they are really going hard after it. Let's watch this ad. Go ahead, Albert, please.
Supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners.
Surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. Every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access.
It's hard to believe, but it's true. Even the liberal media was shocked Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners and illegal aliens.
Every transgender inmate would have access.
Kamala's for they, them. President Trump is for you.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
So that is one of the ads. You know, it strikes me that both these candidates, and every candidate plays a bit to the room they're in. That was a trans podcast that she was in, and she was speaking about various trans rights in that moment. Could you speak to her positions on this and how those positions are being exploited? They're really going hard on the trans thing in these swing states.
And there's a reason, because if you listen to Fox, which I listen to, they make this a major issue. And as a result, because many of these states are close, the feeling is that if you can discredit Kamala Harris, if you can say that she is responsible for all of this, then Trump will pick up votes. It is one of the most, it's like eating cats and dogs if you're a Haitian. It is the kind of thing that is so appalling to me as a political historian, not just as a commentator. I've never in my life seen in any political campaign this kind of horrific stuff. And let me point something else out, that neither Donald Trump nor Senator Vance are agreeing that they will abide by the results of the election on November 5th. that they are talking now about the fact that there is illegal voting going on. And Donald Trump again is pursuing this line. And I can assure you, if North Carolina and Georgia and even Florida are close, they're going to go to town on this thing. So I'm setting us up because I had anticipated that on November 6th, when I appear on this broadcast, a Wednesday, that the election would be decided. But it won't be decided if this kind of disinformation is spread. One other point. The disinformation about FEMA that is being spread now by Donald Trump is appalling, and everyone should object to it, Democrat or Republican alike. And I'm delighted to tell you, although the Republican governors in those states are not repudiating Trump, they are repudiating what he's spreading, these falsehoods. And when Joe Biden spoke this morning, and thank you for playing that, he was spot on, spot on. And I must tell you, when I speak to Trump supporters, I don't know whether it's that they don't get it or they don't want to get it, but that's the reason why it's so close. It's so self-evident, the disaster that Donald Trump presents us. But, well, we'll see.
I don't know that it is so self-evident for a lot of the country, or, you know,
not for Trump voters. You're right.
Yeah.
Not for Trump voters.
Hurricanes are a mental health issue. The Dems' fault. Thoughts and prayers. Plug in any other GOP talking point here. GOP Mad Libs work every time, says Luis. Yeah, I mean, it is true that in addition to denial, there is sort of this the talk around thing that they do. Let me just go back to the trans thing again, because as I say, they're pouring a lot of money into it since the beginning of August.
Take a look at what's happening with Sherrod Brown.
Thank you. Yeah, the Sherrod Brown race is a perfect example.
And let's remind everybody, Sherrod Brown is a distinguished member of the U.S. Senate. He's been in the Senate now 2 terms. He's running for a 3rd. He's a man who was talked about as a potential presidential nominee.
So Sherrod Brown is in Ohio, for those who need a little reminder, and Trump's most aired ad about Vice President Kamala Harris in recent weeks ends with the tagline, "Kamala is for they, them. President Trump is for you." In Ohio, so this is on the Sherrod Brown race, the super PAC has touched on transgender topics repeatedly, accusing Sherrod Brown of, quote, allowing transgender biological males in girls' sports. And, you know, again, Brown
this is a big issue on Fox. Do you understand? This is what they talk about on Fox. Many people listening to this program don't listen to Fox. I do.
In Montana, 5 ads have deployed similar lines about transgender women in sports and bathrooms as Republicans press the case against Senator John Tester. That's another endangered Democrat who's up for re-election. And they're saying he's too liberal for this heavily Republican state. And this is from Brad Todd, who is an ad maker for the GOP. He says, it's one of the issues where Democrats are furthest from the center of the country. They are doing something that is totally illogical to appease a tiny slice that is very radical in their base. And so he's saying, again, the ad maker, he's saying this will be the thing that will effectively work as a political tool for the GOP. I'm a damn, and I do think that we should pay for trans surgeries for inmates. Sorry, says Citizen Swain.
The whole thing is shameful. They ought to be concentrating on the fact that Donald Trump is a climate denier. They ought to be focusing on the fact that FEMA is being attacked by Donald Trump. This transgender issue is a wedge issue for Republicans. They're using it to turn out their base. It's a disgrace. It is. I study presidential elections. You can ask me a question about virtually any presidential election in our history, and I'll give you an answer that is somewhat clear. This is horrific, and it tears down our American political system.
Well, I can ask you a bunch of questions, but I'll tell you, there is no transgender issue in the Millard-Fillmore race. I mean, this is really something of a sign of the times, John. And they're saying up and down the ballot.
Millard-Fillmore, with all due respect, succeeded to the presidency. He ran in 1856 as an independent candidate, but never had a shot at winning.
Oh, well, again, impressive.
But he has a street named after him. He has a street named after him right here in San Francisco.
But so now, I'll just put a button on this by saying, You know, you say, well, what they should be talking about is his climate denial, a bunch of other issues that you know, again, the denial of the election results, the overturning of democracy, the fact
Eating
that he
dogs and cats.
yeah, eating dogs and cats, whatever it might be, but they're hitting these transgender issues because they find there is traction
Yes.
within their potential independence, and in the GOP, it motivates them. So what the Democrats have been doing is essentially ignoring all of this, and they talk about other cultural issues, namely abortion. And in the abortion issue, you have a cultural issue that very much does land cleanly across both parties, with a number of people who could decide this election, specifically women and those who care about women.
Yeah, 100%. The question of a woman's right to choose is critical. To me, it's not an abortion issue. The question is, does a woman have the right to control her own body? Pure and simple. Reproductive rights is critical. And you can see now the Supreme Court just this last week, again, refusing to intervene. And this is another reason why the Democrats, were they smart, will be promoting the fact that you have 3 justices of the Supreme Court who are over the age of 70. The odds are the next president of the United States will nominate additional justices. And is anybody paying attention to the fact that the potential Republican leader in the U.S. Senate who would succeed Mitch McConnell, John Thune, who is the number 2 right now, says, well, if Kamala Harris is elected and we control the Senate and she sends nominees down, they're dead in the water. Do you understand? This kind of rhetoric ought to be emphasized, underlined, and used everywhere. I mean, it's just appalling to me.
Well, I mean, it's more than just rhetoric. They do let various nominations sit there. If they have control of the Senate, John, there will be
what happened to
no advancing of any kind of. Yeah, exactly. Merrick Garland's a great example. Yeah, in the Supreme Court.
Go ahead.
And you know, just because you're on it or you touched on it, the federal judiciary is populated by many Trump appointees. I mean, he was much more aggressive, and I think they've tried to be aggressive within the Biden administration in the appointment of judges, federal judges. But the reality is that Trump was able to get more done in that area, and that is increasingly where laws are made and where culture is defined in this country, don't you think?
Who controls the Senate is who gets the word on the judges. And so that's why for the Democrats, controlling the Senate is so critical. If you had a Trump presidency and a Republican-controlled Senate, we would have, I must tell you, a disaster in the federal judiciary. So these are all issues that need to be played up. But remember, we now have only 4 weeks to go. 4 weeks from today, we'll be talking about the results of the election. So it's important that these issues be raised. One other quick point. CNN has given Kamala Harris and Donald Trump until tomorrow to agree to appear in another debate. Most people are not aware of that. Tomorrow is the deadline. Kamala Harris immediately said yes. Trump appears that he will not say yes, which means we will not have an opportunity to see them. And that's a CNN debate, not Fox, CNN.
Yeah, that is a put up or shut up kind of thing that they're saying toward Trump. It's like, stop with the dance. Maybe I'll do it. Maybe I won't. Either you'll do it or you won't.
And
you've got one day to decide.
He's saying he won't do it.
Yeah, he's saying he won't. But there's also been, sure.
We have debates that have taken place as late as October 28th in advance of a presidential election.
Look, he doesn't want to debate because he knows that really he struggles. And the other fraud that's being perpetuated, and I think, frankly, Kamala Harris stepped into the hole when she did the 60 Minutes interview, although I guess that's what you have to do, is this idea somehow that he has been sitting for interviews and he's out there and is transparent while she has not. I mean, the reality is he calls in, and we've made this point repeatedly, into Fox and Friends. He goes on Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham and Jesse Waters and all those guys, that murderer's row of propaganda. He goes into it and he'll get the back rub from all of them, where they
it's
sort
softball.
of
It's softball. No hard interviews.
I don't even think there's a ball being thrown.
I know you want to cover other things, but I want to say something because we just observed the first anniversary of the disaster that took place in Israel. I want to point out to you that Donald Trump is politicizing this issue as well. He is saying that if he loses the election, and maybe Albert can pull up the sound, if he loses the election, it will be because of the Jews. And I want everyone to be aware that this kind of trope, this anti-Semitic, Jew-hating trope, is dangerous, because if Trump loses the election and if the MAGA Republicans look for a scapegoat, the Jews will be right up there because of Donald Trump's own words.
Oh, you mentioned what's going on in the Middle East, so let me just follow up with you on that. There is an increasingly hot war going on in Lebanon with Hezbollah. Hezbollah controls Lebanon. Hezbollah is Lebanon, in my judgment. And they were probably the most sophisticated terrorist organization in terms of armaments, in terms of organization, military, et cetera, in the region. They've been decapitated by the Israelis pretty effectively. You follow this stuff more closely than do I. What is the situation with some of these groups, specifically Hezbollah, and then these other fronts? Yemen, I will include, Gaza, of course, and Iran.
The pagers blew up. The walkie-talkies blew up. The head of Hezbollah, the army of God, so we all know what it means, Nasrallah, is dead. Most of his key lieutenants are dead. The Israelis are determined. Why? Because, and this is an interesting point, there were 181 ballistic missiles that were fired at Israel. And the important thing is that Iran remains the culprit. The real question, there was a conversation today between President Biden, Vice President Harris, and Bibi Netanyahu. No one knows what was said. And in an interview she just gave on CNN, Kamala Harris said, it's restricted, I can't talk about it. But you can be certain that one of the issues will be, how hard should Israel hit Iran? And I'm going to tell you right now, there is a full awareness of Iran's nuclear capability. The fact that you could have a Hiroshima-type bomb, I hate to say this, but a low-grade nuclear weapon, drop it on Tel Aviv, and you wipe out 2 million Israelis. That's what the Israelis are afraid of. That's why they're doing what they're doing. And I can tell you, with 80,000 Israelis in the north of the country, on the Lebanese border, who have been away from their homes, can't go back to their homes because they're afraid of bombing. And when you saw what happened in Haifa just the other night, and I want to remind everybody, Haifa is the sister city of San Francisco. The missile defense system failed. And as a result, Haifa was hit by these missiles. May I tell you that in Israel, there is a full recognition of the existential threat which continues to exist. So I don't make light of this. I have full sympathy for the Lebanese people. I spent many happy hours in Lebanon, many happy hours in Beirut. But I'm going to tell you right now that you are absolutely correct when you say it's not Lebanon that Israel is having a problem with. It's Hezbollah. And Hezbollah does control too much territory. The same thing applies, by the way. People say, well, Gaza's been devastated. Missiles are coming from Gaza. And you were right to mention the Houthis. They're coming from the Houthis. I mean, the Israelis are basically fighting a 7, or if you want, 8-front war. Not to mention, and I do want to mention this, the tremendous hatred of Jews which has emerged, not only in Europe, but sadly right here in the United States, including a major author who has just put out the biggest bunch of bunk I've ever read in my life, saying he'd never been there before, but this is what he noticed. So I'm pointing this out to you. I'm pointing this out because this is a dangerous time. By the time I am on with you next week, there will be an attack directly by Iran on Israel. The Israelis are ready for it, and the Israelis are getting ready to respond with full vigor. So this is just the beginning of what I regret to say is a tragedy for so many innocents who are made victims by this radical Islamic point. One other quick point. Somebody asked me, would a two-state solution solve the problem? The answer is no, and the answer is because Hamas doesn't favor a two-state solution. Hezbollah doesn't favor a two-state solution. The Houthis don't favor a two-state solution. And I can tell you the Iranians don't favor a two-state solution. The goal of these radical forces is the destruction of Israel. And I can assure everyone, whether you are pro or against, whatever you think of the war, the Israelis are not going to roll over and play dead.
Well, if the two-state solution or negotiations and navigating toward a two-state solution won't solve the problem or help the problem, then John, I'm really downcast about the future of the region. I mean, I don't see how you have a thriving region given these kinds of hostilities, and you've suggested the hostilities are going to become even more amplified over the next week.
Correct. 100%. Now, how do you ultimately succeed? The Israeli position is to decapitate the forces that would destroy them. Interestingly enough, and where you are, this is even more interesting. Next week, the presumptive new Shah of Iran will be feted at the Nixon Library. The Shah's widow will not be there, but she's part of the celebration. Let me remind you that one of the agenda items, not just for the United States, but for Israel, is to remove the mullahs from control of Iran. I don't know whether that's possible, but the fact that the Shah's son is front and center, and you can hear a message. If you go to the Nixon Library website, they have a 3-minute videotape of the Shah's son talking about the fact that these radical extremists have to be eliminated. I point this out because there are so many dynamics, so many layers to this, and it is such a critical issue. Let's remember that we have less than 4 weeks to go before the election. Can you imagine what a major Middle East war would mean? Donald Trump has said to the Israelis, go after the Iranian nuclear sites.
Well, he said two things. He said, go after the Iranian nuclear sites and let's get this thing over with,
Yep.
which, I mean, I don't know what that means. I mean,
Well,
like everybody
the
wants
point
this
is,
thing over with.
Joe Biden is saying, don't hit the nuclear sites. And the whole issue now is, in the end, the Israelis are going to do what they think they have to do. By the way,
Well, Biden wants de-escalation without question, but I want to just speak about, you talk about the Israelis. I mean, the Israelis and Benjamin Netanyahu are two different things.
Exactly.
Isn't that true? Yeah.
Yes, 100%. And you will notice that's how Kamala Harris responded during her 60 Minutes interview. She was asked directly about Netanyahu. She says, our alliance is not with a prime minister. Our alliance is with Israel. The alliance between the United States and Israel is firm and strong. And she made clear that she considers the number one enemy, the number one concern has to be Iran. She was unambiguous about it, and she talked particularly about Iran's developing a nuclear capability. There is an absolute unity between Democrats and Republicans on this. Although I just have to observe, if Donald Trump were president, he would be urging the Israelis to use restraint. And if Joe Biden were not in office, he'd be saying, go do what you have to do. It's all a question of incumbency and the way you view your role in the world. I'm often reminded when Nixon went to China, we all laughed and said, if Nixon had been out of office and Humphrey had urged going to China, Nixon would have led the opposition. So it's a matter of where you sit in terms
Maybe
of...
I take your point about the opposition, but I think the examples are a really good one. But I think on this, I don't know that Joe Biden, if he were out of power, would be saying, bomb Iran and
he wouldn't say
nuclear.
bomb Iran. He's not talking about bombing anything. The point is,
taking out the nuclear sites is bombing. I mean, that's what they were talking about.
No, not just bombing. Forgive me. You know that the Iranian nuclear development was nearly halted by computers and also by, frankly, assassination of leading nuclear scientists in Iran. There are a variety of methods which can be used. But let me point out again that when you deal with Iran, there are so many imponderables. Do they already have a capability? How much of a capability? And can their ICBMs, which can reach Israel, imagine if you had a low-grade nuclear weapon, low-grade Hiroshima-type nuclear weapon attached to an ICBM that hit Tel Aviv, you would have a major catastrophe. And that is the reason that there is such concern. Iron Dome, which is a remarkable achievement, cannot withstand massive numbers of missiles flying. And that best example is what happened in Haifa this last week, where the system failed and missiles got through.
In this last dash to the finish line when it comes to this election, are there any issues? The more you talk, the more I feel like, wow, I think both candidates, in an attempt to be, fair about things, I would say both candidates need to avoid certain situations. Nothing seems to stick to Trump. I mean, I've looked at the last month or so. If Kamala Harris had pulled out of the 60 Minutes interview, do you know the kind of hue and cry we would hear about it? I mean, the mainstream media, for all of this stuff about them being lefties and all the rest of it, they're all over Kamala Harris like a bad smell about not doing sit-down interviews. I told you, and on this show I said it, you know who wants her to do sit-down interviews? People who do sit-down interviews. That's who wants it. But if you say it enough and it gets out there, then it gets into the body politic. And it's like, yeah, I don't know enough about her. How come she doesn't do interviews?
It's
He does all these
absolute
interviews.
rubbish. It's the same disinformation you're seeing now with FEMA. Let me point out to you that Donald Trump only does, as you just pointed out, set up interviews. There's no, that's why he wouldn't go on 60 Minutes.
He does friendly interviews, exactly. And the other thing, John, just not to cut you off, but that fact checking, it was for J.D. Vance and it was for Trump, a deal buster. Like, I thought you weren't going to fact check us. And one of the reasons he said he didn't want to do 60 Minutes is because they were fact checking. He said that out loud. Like, why would that be? Oh, so you don't want to be fact checked? Well, I mean, what does that say about what you're saying? What does that reflect?
Can I ask, I would like, Albert, there is one ad that has come out which features Mike Pence, John Bolton, and two other former officials of the Trump administration, all saying that they consider Trump to be unfit to be president of the United States. If you can get that ad.
Yeah, we've shown it before. The people who served in his administration who say he's unfit. I have two things to say about that. Number one, how dare you come on my show and, bark out to Albert things that you want.
Why are you yelling?
He is not your producer. I cannot believe this.
Whoever is producing this thing
just
has
say
no
you
idea what they're doing.
You have a guest on the show. He comes on my show and he goes, Albert, find something. It's a video. It's John Bolton, and then he barks out a bunch of other orders. How dare you come on here like this?
Why are you yelling? I am impertinent at very.
Thank you. Impertinent.
Seriously, what the?
Yeah.
Impertinent, isn't that a ding word?
Impertinence is a ding word. Impertinent and impertinence. Wow, very strong. And Albert, I'm not. You need. Let me tell you how I work with Albert. I send him, for the most part, things. If you have things in the future, Brother Rothman, we are happy to run them. We'll run whatever you want. But you can't just come on and go, and you're acting like some kind of Habsburgian king. You come on here like it's crazy.
Seriously, what the?
All right.
Thank you, Albert. I apologize for the abuse you're taking.
Albert, thank you.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Albert, that you have to scramble while Rothman barks out orders on a show he's not even a host of. Kim, did you have something for? Did you have something? Did you have something for Rothman before I let him go? Kim.
No, I just earlier was going to, you guys were talking about what happens if one of the legislative branches is red, doesn't turn blue this time. And I was listening yesterday. I watched all the Kamala Harris interviews that came down. She was on The View. She was on Colbert. She did Howard Stern yesterday as well. And she really pushed these economic policies that she's talking about. She's going to give first-time home buyers some assistance, small businesses some assistance. She wants to pay for home health care, to give families and caretakers some assistance there. And when asked how she was going to pay for it, she talked about, making the wealthy pay their fair share and corporations pay their fair share. And all that's great, but she can't do any of that unless she gets votes from Congress, right? And
100%.
Yeah, and so none of the things that she's promising or her ideas can't be put into place unless the folks that control the purse strings vote along with her. And I don't know how likely that is.
It depends on who controls Congress. Look, I'm going to make a prediction. I'm going to stick my neck out. I think that the Republicans are going to lose control of the House. I think the Democrats are going to control the House. But in the Senate, there's a problem. And we could talk about the fact that Tester in North Dakota is a very close race. That
he's going to lose. It's close, but he's been on the wrong end of the polling for months.
Ted Cruz is now behind in some polls in Texas. That has tremendous implication. So let's just set it up for a moment. Whoever wins the presidency is going to nominate justices for the Supreme Court. Please take a look. That's the United States Senate that votes yay or nay. If the Republicans control the Senate, it will be a huge problem for Harris, and it will be a great bonus for Donald Trump. So if most people don't think about control, in the House of Representatives, it's a whole different matter because they have the power of the purse, but they don't vote on judges. So it's a dichotomy in American politics.
And this is the point I was making before, that if you really want the federal judiciary, you must have the Senate. On all those races you've spoken of in the Senate, you know that the Democrats trail, and it's very likely the Democrats will lose the Senate and win the House. So that's really where the state of the race right now. There's nothing happening that would likely change that.
Well, you never know. We've got 4 weeks to go.
But I'm just saying, if well, I'll put it this way: if things maintain where they are now, and as you pointed out, a bunch of stuff could happen. I mean, and the Middle East may be a chief among them.
And this disaster in a few hours is going to have a huge impact. Can you imagine? Let me just point out, I talked to a buddy of mine in Florida today, and I said, Trump is going to carry Florida, right? He said, well, John, it depends. If this storm is that big, and if the Haitian community organizes and votes against Donald Trump, Florida could get into the mix. Now, who knows? I mean, this is just one political observer, but my point to you is there are so many imponderables at this moment, and that's why, to be honest with you, you do such a great job on this program. Oh, I'm not paying you a compliment.
Well, I love how you stuck the landing. Very nice with the compliment. I will say, just to put a specific on what John's talking about, southwestern Florida, people should know, is a traditionally GOP area. Southwestern Florida is a part of the state that will be very hard hit from this incoming system. So again, this is an emerging human tragedy, and we're watching it from that standpoint. But if you look at it purely politically, the southwestern part of the state may have issues regarding voting, because if there really is the devastation that many are talking about, I'm talking about experts are speaking of, you may have problems cobbling together any kind of voting. People will leave the state, for example, because they've already evacuated or whatever may happen. So you end up in a situation in Florida with a different demography than you typically have. That's what John's talking about. So it's really an interesting situation there.
I was asked this morning, if there is a real disruption, can you hold the election on a separate day? And the answer is no. It would require an unbelievable movement that's never happened before. And you will remember that in the year 2000, in the Gore-Bush thing, there were people who said, well, Florida should vote again. Do you remember that? And the answer was no, not a chance. So there are a lot of implications. When you dig down into this and you talk about American politics, the Electoral College, voting for all this stuff, it's fascinating and it raises so many questions. And I'm only sorry that we are not still on KGO. I would remind you, it was exactly 2 years ago that experience ended, because this is something, Mark, if you and I were still 7 days, 5 days a week, crossing paths, we'd be emphasizing. So people should know, and I want to say this again, what a service the Mark Thompson program here is. And it needs to be supported, because heaven forbid it should vanish. So Mark, you have my full support and confidence, even if you're not always right.
Well, I think there's enough of a compliment to yes, the audience agrees. You can find Jonathan Rothman around the political world, but John Rothman is his podcast. Again, you can find it wherever podcasts are available. It's free. Around the Political World with John Rothman. It's a daily podcast. You can hear his musings on any number of things. Also, you can hear him at thevoicesf.org. Isn't that it? It's .org, I believe.
The Voice of San Francisco. And you go to podcasts. I do, just so people know this, quick commercial, I do about 10 minutes for the Voice of San Francisco today, talking about the San Francisco schools crisis. But on Around the Political World, it's also about 10 minutes every day, Monday through Friday. And I do the best that I can to say at least what I think. And again, Mark, thank you, and thank Kim, and thank Albert. A pleasure to be with you.
Harry Magnan says, love the Daily Rothman podcast. Do I feel Rothman money donation coming, asks the Trick Era. No, it's tough to jackhammer money out of Rothman. You know, he's big with the words and big with the pronouncements, but when it comes down to the dollars and cents, can't really
that
find
would make
his way.
no sense at all.
Yeah,
I don't charge for my podcast. but
right.
I believe
he
in
does.
supporting.
He shows up here for free, which is enough of a
And
contribution.
I do
so.
believe in supporting Mark, and I believe in
Yeah.
supporting Kim, and I believe in supporting Albert. So keep up the good work.
All right, a lot of love for you here.
Oh, wait, but before you
ahead.
go, we got a super chat yesterday asking if we could ask you a question, and I
yes,
took a
thank
picture
you.
of it, and so here it is from Lori Dolly. Tomorrow, that was yesterday, please ask John Rothmann about ranked choice and how to strategize your vote specifically for San Francisco mayor, supervisor, school district. Thanks, and hope the cash is an incentive to ask John Rothmann the question.
Will you give me 1 minute? Can I take 1 minute, Mark, to do this?
Yes, please
First of all,
go for it.
I
We need
oppose
that
ranked
answer.
choice voting, but it is the system we have. You must vote for at least 2 people in the mayor's race. If you only vote for one, you're throwing away your vote. And do not give the same rank to more than one candidate. Such rankings, overvotes, will not be counted. And do not mark the same candidate more than once. Somebody said to me they were for candidate X. What if I just marked them all? No. You'll throw your vote away. I was asked last night who will win the mayor's election. I have no idea because it is not a head-to-head contest. It is ranked choice voting. And you all understand in San Francisco, you can vote for up to 10 people for mayor. They recommend that. I'm telling you, there are 5 key candidates. Do rank them. It's very important. And maybe, Mark, before the next week, and next week we can do it for a few minutes, just on this ranked choice voting thing, because I just got my ballot in the mail. And so we're now already.
You feel free to. You can endorse. We will. We'll talk to you next week, and you can. I mean, I think that's kind of what Lori was saying.
No, I've always been reluctant to tell people how I'm going to vote because it's not how I vote; it's what you think. But if there are questions that people have about positions, maybe we can do that next week.
All right. A lot of people agree with you. Ranked choice voting is horrible.
Had I run for mayor, and I seriously thought about running for mayor, as you know. Had I run for mayor, one of the planks of my platform would have been to eliminate ranked choice voting. It is horrific. It wreaks havoc. And
how did it happen, John? How did we end up with it?
They wanted to save money because if you do another round of voting in terms of another election in December,
in other words, when it's close, yeah,
it would be no top two runoff. You automatically
right. That's what I'm saying. But it's close. If you need a runoff, is what my point
right.
is.
Yeah. I'm in favor of a runoff. I want a choice. And
Sure.
I was deeply involved in the 75 election, which was the first runoff, which pitted George Moscone to the left against John Barbadgello to the right. Dianne Feinstein, Jack Artola, and Milton Marks split the center vote, and they didn't make the runoff. But it was important to have that runoff. Now, well, we'll see. And by the way, there are alliances being made. So Farrell is making an alliance with Safai. Right now, Daniel Lurie is attacking Farrell with everything he has because he views Farrell as his main competition. And London Breed, well, she's just riding along as the incumbent and hopes that enough people will put her as a second or third choice that she'll win.
This is in the race for mayor in San Francisco for those who are just looking in from elsewhere. John, thank you. We're way out of time. Talk to you soon and appreciate it. No, not at all. Good stuff, buddy. Appreciate you being here.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.